Overlooking a placid suburban lane in the heart of Woodpine Meadows stood rows of nearly identical houses, each front lawn meticulously trimmed, each driveway gleaming with parked cars that fit the Homeowners Association's strict guidelines. From the outside, anyone visiting might see a picture-perfect neighborhood, quiet, orderly, brimming with freshly painted fences and blossoming flower beds. But like many American suburbs, Woodpine Meadows had its share of undercurrents. This was a place where neighborly conflicts sometimes simmered behind polite greetings. At the core of these tensions, so the stories went, stood the local HOA, a powerful entity dictating everything from mailbox height to color palettes for shutters. Towering over the HOA's day-to-day management was Harriet Farnett, a woman in her late 40s who ran the association with the sternness of a headmistress. Though Harriet insisted on being addressed by her given name, nearly everyone on the block privately referred to her as Karen, a nickname reflecting her self-righteous, often overbearing style. Whether it was an unapproved garden gnome or an incorrectly parked vehicle, Harriet was sure to confront it, brandishing the HOA rulebook as her personal scepter. Little did anyone suspect, however, that Harriet was about to thrust the entire community into a rift over something as mundane and heartbreaking as the faint black lines of a wheelchair's tires on the neighborhood's common sidewalk. Chloe Andrews, a bright 10-year-old with a ponytail and an infectious grin, lived near the center of Woodpine Meadows. Each afternoon, after finishing her homework, she'd race outside to play on her roller skates or draw with chalk on the sidewalks. She took particular joy in leaving cheerful sketches, smiley faces, flowers, and random doodles that brightened the otherwise uniform walkways. Next door to Chloe lived Leon Barrett, a soft-spoken, reflective 11-year-old who rode his bike daily, meticulously counting each swirl in the pavement. Leon was something of a budding artist himself, though more reserved than Chloe. They'd known each other since they were toddlers, forging a friendship built on imagination and a shared joy of exploring their small suburban world. On a brisk spring afternoon, Chloe and Leon sat on the curb, hunched over a bucket of chalk sticks. They were coloring the sidewalk squares in patchwork shapes, purple, green, and orange. Nearby neighbors often teased them for turning the walkway into an art gallery, but many also secretly adored the playful colors. As they worked, a gentle were approached from a distance. Around the corner came Jacob Miller, a middle-aged man in a motorized wheelchair. Chloe and Leon smiled at him. Jacob passed by almost every day around this hour, offering the kids a friendly wave. He had moved into Woodpine Meadows a year earlier, a few blocks away, and relied on the wide sidewalks for daily exercise and errands. He often complimented Chloe's chalk drawings or gave Leon pointers on shading. The children found him both kind and surprisingly upbeat despite his mobility challenges. Chloe waved eagerly. "Hi, Mr. Miller," Leon added. "We added a big rainbow star over there. Careful not to smudge it too soon." He grinned, though he didn't mind if the chalk got a bit smeared. In truth, they loved seeing the wheelchair tracks blend colors into interesting patterns. Jacob smiled. "Don't worry, I'll take the path edges." Then, with a playful wink, he rolled carefully, leaving faint dark impressions behind him. The kids didn't mind at all. To them, it was part of the collaborative sidewalk tapestry. None realized that Harriet Farnett, Karen, had been watching from her house across the street, her eyes narrowing at those dark marks. That evening, Harriet Farnett stood at her living room window, arms folded. The day's last light illuminated the faint black streaks left on the sidewalk. She spotted Chloe's rainbow star, partially smudged where Jacob's tires had rolled. Harriet's lips curled in distaste. To Harriet, the sidewalk belonged to the HOA, representing the neighborhood's polished aesthetic. She believed chalk drawings and wheelchair skid marks undermined the clean, uniform look that property values demanded. While no official rule forbade sidewalk chalk, Harriet found it unsightly. She disliked the children's drawings for some time, but had not found a suitable reason to clamp down. Now, the wheelchair marks gave her a perfect opening, some new infraction to exploit. "Just look at that," Harriet muttered. "Black rubber streaks, chalk scribbles. Ridiculous." She scanned the HOA manual, searching for any clause about defacement of communal paths. It didn't specifically mention chalk or wheelchairs, but Harriet's mind spun with ways to interpret generic vandalism or damage rules to fit the situation. The next morning, Harriet marched onto the sidewalk before most neighbors stirred. She stooped, examining the rubber lines. To the casual eye, there were mild shadows that a gust of wind or light rain might eventually erase. Yet Harriet snapped photos with her phone, determined to present them as damage. She would make the wheelchair user, Jacob, pay for cleaning if it was the last thing she did. And if the children persisted with chalk art, she'd find a way to implicate them too. As Harriet returned inside, her eyes gleamed with self-righteous zeal. She typed an email to the HOA board, subject line, "Urgent, graffiti and rubber defacement on our sidewalks." She attached the photos, demanding immediate action. Harriet Karen, had set her sights on a new crusade. A day later, a neatly folded notice appeared in Jacob Miller's mailbox. It bore the HOA logo at the top and read, "Dear Mr. Miller, it has come to our attention that repeated tire marks from your motorized wheelchair have caused unsightly lines and scuffs on the sidewalks of Woodpine Meadows. This constitutes a violation of Section 5.2.1 of the HOA guidelines concerning the defacement of communal property. You are hereby requested to cover the cost of professional sidewalk cleaning and refrain from further damaging neighborhood walkways. Failure to comply may result in additional fines or legal measures. Sincerely, Woodpine Meadows HOA, on behalf of Ms. Harriet Farnett, Community Standards Coordinator." Jacob read the notice in disbelief. He had never faced such hostility over something so trivial. A swirl of emotions hit him: anger, confusion, shame. The sidewalk was public property, and to his knowledge, no one minded him traveling across it. He used his wheelchair carefully, not revving or skidding. If Harriet believed mild rubber marks equaled vandalism, what hope did he have? Jacob called the HOA office, only to be directed to Harriet Farnett's email. He sent a polite message, explaining that he couldn't stop using the sidewalk, nor could he prevent basic tire scuffs. He offered to occasionally wipe the path, but insisted there was no real damage. Harriet replied curtly, "Mr. Miller, your compliance is mandatory. The neighborhood invests in pristine conditions, and your repeated disregard is unacceptable. Enclosed is the estimated cost for cleaning, $200. Please remit payment or a scheduled solution immediately." Jacob felt a knot in his stomach. He lived on a fixed income, grappling with medical expenses. This $200 demand for something intangible felt like extortion. Unsure what to do, he confided in neighbor friends, including Chloe's family. News traveled fast. Late that afternoon, Chloe and Leon perched on her front steps, gulping lemonade. Over by the curb, they noticed Jacob speaking with Chloe's dad in hushed tones. The kids caught phrases like wheelchair scuffs, $200 cleanup, unfair. When Jacob rolled away, he gave them a subdued wave, lacking his usual smile. Worried, the children pressed Chloe's dad for details. He explained Harriet Farnett's complaint, her demand for money, how Mr. Miller was being singled out. Leon's eyes widened, fists clenched. "That's so unfair," he said. "He can't just stop using his wheelchair. It's not hurting anyone." Chloe frowned. "Our chalk drawings leave color, but it's harmless. We like seeing the marks. We never minded the tire lines. They made neat patterns, right?" Her father nodded. "Sadly, Harriet's using the HOA rules to bully him. I'm sure grown-ups will figure something out." He tried to be reassuring, though he sounded uncertain. But Chloe and Leon weren't satisfied. They recalled Harriet's sour expression whenever she'd pass by them coloring the sidewalk. They realized she disapproved not just of the wheelchair lines, but of the kids' chalk decorations too. They sensed that Jacob's situation might escalate unless the neighborhood rallied against Harriet's pettiness. That evening, while sharing secrets in Chloe's treehouse, the two kids brainstormed ways to show support for Mr. Miller. Leon proposed making bigger chalk signs. Chloe suggested writing "Welcome, WCLCHARS" across the sidewalk. They giggled at the boldness. But an even grander idea flickered into life? What if they covered the entire walkway with bright, positive chalk art? That way, the black tire lines would become part of a rainbow mosaic. Harriet's claim that it was damage would look ridiculous when the entire sidewalk was cheerfully decorated. The more Chloe and Leon discussed it, the more excited they grew. Their plan: gather friends from the neighborhood, use all the chalk they could find, and create a massive, continuous artwork across the main sidewalk route that Jacob used daily. Not just small drawings here and there, a full rainbow welcome path. They imagined swirling patterns, broad stripes of color, cartoon animals, and encouraging words like "you belong" or "roll on." The path would stretch from the corner near Leon's house all the way to the bus stop on Maple Drive, well over 100 yards. It would be an open invitation for everyone, especially wheelchair users, to roll through and blend the colors. Even if Harriet tried to wash it away, she'd face a rainbow outcry from a bunch of kids. "We'll start tomorrow," Leon said, eyes shining. "Right after school, we'll gather all the chalk we can. Maybe we can ask older kids to help too." Chloe nodded vigorously. "We'll need a lot of chalk. Let's see if the local craft store has big boxes." She rummaged in her backpack for some money she'd saved. "I'll buy some. You text your friends." Though it was a bit rebellious, the children believed Harriet Farnett had stepped out of line. If chalk was considered defacement, they'd embrace it fully, turning the sidewalk into a living, rolling tapestry that welcomed anyone's footprints or wheelchair tracks as part of the design. Harriet's notion that it was messy or damage would be overshadowed by the explosion of color and unity. That night, Chloe had trouble sleeping from the anticipation. She pictured Mr. Miller's smile if he saw a sidewalk brimming with supportive messages. She hoped the entire neighborhood would see Harriet's stance as mean-spirited once they realized how little harm chalk and mild tire marks truly caused. Word spread quickly among the neighborhood's children by text messages, whispers at the school lunch table, and short calls on cell phones. The plan: gather on Friday afternoon near Chloe's house, bring any chalk they could scrounge, and spend hours transforming the sidewalk. Some of the kids felt a thrill at defying Harriet Farnett. Others simply wanted to help Jacob. A few older siblings, ages 13 or 14, offered to sketch advanced designs, from cartoon murals to 3D illusions. The younger ones beamed at the chance to fill squares with rainbows. Even some parents, upon hearing the idea, quietly approved. Harriet's pettiness had grated on them for years. She'd once fined a family for painting a porch swing turquoise instead of the approved shade of blue. Many saw this chalk extravaganza as a harmless protest and a statement of kindness. They decided to let the kids handle it, while monitoring from a distance in case Harriet tried to intervene. Friday arrived, bright and mild. By 3:30 p.m., a small crowd of kids gathered on the sidewalk near Chloe's home. Leon brought a wagon loaded with chalk boxes, courtesy of an older neighbor who donated them after hearing the plan. Another friend had stencils for letters, hoping to write phrases like "everyone is welcome." The children fanned out, dividing the walkway into sections. Some drew free-form swirls, others drafted giant hearts or shapes reminiscent of stained glass windows. The older kids labored on more elaborate scenes: rainforest animals, city skylines, a starry night. The younger ones scribbled flowers, stars, and big smiley faces. Everyone pitched in, laughing and exclaiming as colors mingled. Soon, passers-by slowed to watch. A few parents, snapping photos with phones, wore amused grins. Over the next 2 hours, the sidewalk metamorphosed from plain concrete into a kaleidoscope of color spanning nearly half a block. The children giggled each time a bicyclist or runner passed, leaving a streak in the chalk dust. That was part of the fun. Footprints and wheel marks turned into ongoing art. But in the window of Harriet Farnett's house, a figure loomed. Karen, eyes narrowed, phone camera capturing the activity as evidence. She couldn't believe such a blatant display of vandalism. She marched outside, intent on halting the spectacle. When Harriet approached, her posture rigid and lips set in a tight line, the children froze. Chalk dust still coated their hands, bright pinks and blues. Chloe swallowed hard as Harriet's sharp gaze landed on the half-finished rainbow arch. "Stop this immediately," Harriet demanded, voice loud. "You children are defacing HOA property with unauthorized chalk scribbles. This is a direct violation of cleanliness standards." She grabbed her phone, snapping more pictures. Leon, heart-pounding, mustered courage. "We're not damaging anything. It's just chalk. It'll wash away in the next rain or with a hose." Harriet's nostrils flared. "This is still graffiti. The sidewalk must remain neutral and free of your doodles. Don't you realize how it lowers property values? You'll all be reported. And your parents, too." Some of the younger kids shrank back, frightened. But older ones stood firm, a rebellious spark in their eyes. They knew chalk art was typically considered harmless. Did Harriet truly expect them to believe they were criminals? Just then, a voice cut in. Chloe's mom, stepping on her porch. "Harriet, with all due respect, they're not damaging anything. Chalk is temporary. The kids have a right to express themselves, especially if it helps unify the neighborhood. Don't forget, you singled out Mr. Miller's wheelchair marks as if they were some permanent stain. This is a response to that unfairness." Harriet glowered. "I won't argue with you here, but I assure you, the HOA will demand a thorough power wash, and your families will bear the cost." She spun on her heel and stomped away, leaving tension crackling in the air. Moments later, the children resumed their chalking with renewed determination. Some felt shaky, but they had adult support now. Parents murmured encouragement. Harriet might threaten fines or cleanup fees, but they believed the entire block would rally against her. Indeed, neighbors who witnessed the scene voiced quiet outrage at Harriet's hostility. A sense of solidarity crystallized around the kids' effort. By the time the sun dipped low, the sidewalk had become a breathtaking tapestry. Transitions of color-formed arcs, swirling lines, and illusions of stepping stones. Written across the largest section, in rainbow letters nearly 3 feet tall, were the words, "Welcome, WHELCHRS." The phrase was flanked by doodles of spinning wheels, hearts, and friendly smiley faces. Chloe and Leon stepped back to admire the result. Chalk dust streaked their clothes and arms. Despite Harriet's threats, they felt triumphant. They placed an extra message near the end, reading, "All are invited. Roll or stroll." As dusk settled, neighbors who saw the completed path couldn't help but smile. A few took pictures, praising the children's creativity. Some older residents ambled by with canes or strollers, adding subtle lines of where that blended into the art. The scene exuded warmth and inclusivity. Anyone was free to traverse and leave a mark. Jacob Miller, learning of the kids' plan, arrived to see the finished sidewalk. He was almost speechless. "It's so beautiful," he murmured, eyes misting. He gently rolled his wheelchair onto the chalk, wheels pressing patterns into swirling colors. The children cheered as the black rubber trails merged with the rainbow lines, forming a mesmerizing mosaic. If Harriet Farnett wanted to label those marks as damage, she now had an entire kaleidoscope of color to contend with. But even in the midst of that celebratory moment, a small thread of worry tugged at everyone's minds. Harriet was sure to strike back. She wouldn't let the sidewalk stay chalk for long. The question was, would the rest of the HOA side with her or see reason? Sure enough, within 24 hours, Harriet unleashed a barrage of official-looking letters in mailboxes across Woodpine Meadows. The document, titled Urgent Sidewalk Compliance Notice, stated that an unauthorized chalk graffiti installation had appeared on communal walkways, and that all relevant families must remove it immediately or face monetary penalties. Harriet pegged the estimated cleanup cost at $300, threatening to distribute fees among those responsible. Parents reacted with anger or exasperation. Some joined forces, signing a petition claiming chalk was not destructive. They emphasized that a single rain shower would remove it, or it would naturally fade within days. The question, would the rest of the HOA board listen? Harriet was the self-styled community standards coordinator, but the board included other members, some less extreme. However, Harriet had a knack for pressuring or intimidating them. Meanwhile, The children refused to erase their creation. They poured hours of labor and heart into that sidewalk. Jacob, determined not to be cowed, told them, "I'll help defend this artwork. It's a testament to acceptance. If Harriet wants to blame me for tire marks, let her see the real community response." The tension climaxed when Harriet scheduled an emergency HOA meeting at the neighborhood clubhouse. Rumor said she proposed a new bylaw banning chalk, wheelchair defacement, and any unapproved sidewalk use. The entire block braced for a showdown. Some feared Harriet's ability to manipulate the rules, but others prepared to speak up, eager to protect the colorful path and shield Jacob from harassment. On a warm Wednesday evening, residents trickled into the Woodpine Meadows Community Center, where fold-out chairs faced a long table occupied by Harriet Farnett and 3 other board members. A hush fell as Harriet rapped a gavel, calling the meeting to order. She wasted no time denouncing the chalk fiasco, displaying enlarged photos of the sidewalk brimming with swirling color and the words, "Welcome, WHELCHARS." Her tone dripped with disdain. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is clearly vandalism. Our sidewalks are turning into an eyesore. I move we pass a resolution banning any form of chalk drawing and holding individuals responsible for cleaning or damages caused by wheelchair tires, strollers, skateboards, etc." Murmurs spread through the crowd. Chloe and Leon were seated with their parents in the second row, a handful of other kids behind them, eyes wide. Jacob Miller sat near the aisle, wearing a calm expression despite Harriet's pointed mention of wheelchair damages. One board member, Ms. Lopez, coughed gently. "Harriet, we've never disallowed chalk before. Kids have drawn hopscotch lines for decades. As for wheelchair tires, this seems discriminatory. The sidewalk is for everyone, including those with mobility devices." Harriet fired back. "It's not discrimination. It's about preserving a pristine environment. If wheelchair tires or strollers leave marks, they should be responsible for cleanup. Chalk is likewise a defacement that can stain, requiring power washing." A wave of protest erupted from the audience. Parents rose, voicing that chalk was easily removable, typically washed away by the next rain. One father declared, "I'll pay for the hose water myself if it means Harriet stops harassing our kids." Laughter and applause followed, though Harriet scowled. Jacob quietly raised his hand to speak. With the board's nod, he wheeled forward, placing himself in clear view. "I've tried to be a respectful neighbor," he began. "My wheelchair's small lines on the sidewalk hardly constitute damage. The children's chalk art has made me feel welcome, not singled out. If you punish that, you're punishing community spirit." He paused, voice trembling slightly. "Also, if you label wheelchair marks as vandalism, you're telling me, someone who depends on these sidewalks daily, that I can't exist in your pristine environment without paying a fee. That is discrimination." A hush fell, Harriet's lips thin with frustration. She started to object, but Ms. Lopez cut in. "Mr. Miller has a point. So do the parents. I'd like to hear from more residents." The floor opened, and a wave of neighbors approached the microphone, testifying to how the chalk path brightened the neighborhood, how it was purely temporary, and how Harriet's stance felt punitive. By meeting's end, the board seemed split, but Harriet's attempt to pass an immediate ban fizzled under the onslaught of dissent. They postponed the vote, scheduling another session to review legalities. Harriet left in a huff, while the sidewalk's defenders breathed a partial sigh of relief. The chalk might be safe a bit longer. The day after the tense meeting, something magical happened. More children, and a few adults, decided to expand the rainbow welcome path. They added fresh chalk designs in other sections of the neighborhood, turning corners and side streets into mini galleries. A local teacher, Ms. Donovan, guided older kids to create an impressive mural of the entire Woodpine Meadows map, stylized with swirling lines. Leon's older brother stenciled powerful words like inclusion, community, and respect across the walkway. Others drew whimsical cartoon characters, some in wheelchairs or on crutches, smiling under the slogan, "All are welcome." The new sections connected with the original path, forming a labyrinth of color that meandered half a mile through the neighborhood's main sidewalks. Passers-by were astonished. A handful of local reporters, hearing whispers of the conflict, came to photograph or interview residents. The story, Chalk Art versus HOA, spread on social media. Public sentiment leaned strongly toward the children's inclusive message. Harriet Farnett, outraged by the spotlight cast on her negativity, retreated behind official statements, warning that she'd still enforce rules. But the groundswell of support seemed unstoppable. Jacob, rolling along the extended path, was greeted by cheering kids and even a small guard of honor, who parted to let his wheelchair swirl fresh tracks through the rainbow lines. The effect was mesmerizing. The tire scuffs enhanced the chalk's swirling illusions, proving how dynamic and ephemeral the art was. Harriet's talk of defacement rang hollow when so many viewed the wheelchair marks as a joyful addition. One evening, after the colors had grown more vibrant, a gentle rain began. Children scrambled outside with umbrellas, some chalk dissolving into tinted streams that snaked down the curb. Instead of lamenting the wash away, the kids giggled, letting new patterns form in watery blends. By dawn, much of the original chalk had faded, replaced by pastel ghosts. Yet the spirit of the rainbow welcome path remained. Despite the partial wash-off from the rain, Harriet Farnett refused to yield. She circulated a revised bylaw proposal among board members, a ban on unapproved markings or scuffing of any public walkway. The language encompassed chalk, paint, and even excessive tire tread. Harriet aimed to penalize Jacob directly. But something crucial had shifted. Harriet's heavy-handed approach had drawn negative coverage, not just from local media, but from a disabled rights advocacy group. They labeled Harriet's proposal discriminatory, threatening legal action if the HOA adopted any bylaw, singling out mobility devices or everyday sidewalk usage. The group pointed out that the Americans with Disabilities Act protected wheelchair users from undue burden on public or community sidewalks. Harriet found herself cornered by more than just angry neighbors. Federal law was at stake. At the next board session, Ms. Lopez and another member openly opposed Harriet's measure, referencing the blowback from news outlets and possible legal ramifications. Harriet argued vehemently that HOA aesthetics had to be preserved, but the tide had turned. Even typically cautious board members realized Harriet's stance invited lawsuits. The proposed ban was quietly dropped. In a separate statement, Ms. Lopez declared, "Chalk drawings and normal wheelchair marks do not constitute damage. Our HOA sees no violation in children expressing community values, nor in residents using mobility aids." Ms. Farnett's concerns, while noted, cannot override fundamental inclusivity or hamper everyday life. For Harriet, it was a humiliating blow. Her once unchallenged authority crumbled under public scrutiny. The wheelchair cleanup fee demanded from Jacob was rescinded, and any talk of sidewalk fines vanished. The board, seeking to salvage its reputation, even commended the children for fostering unity through creativity. Harriet scowled, forcibly nodding along to avoid further negative press. With the conflict settled in the children's favor, Woodpine Meadows embraced a friendlier vibe. Though Harriet remained in her home, her power to intimidate waned significantly. Neighbors who once cowered at her memos realized that her influence was limited when confronted by collective goodwill and legal truths. Jacob Miller, relieved of any cleaning fees, continued his daily rides. Sometimes, to celebrate, Chloe and Leon would freshen up chalk designs so Jacob's tires could swirl new patterns. Other residents began leaving small, positive chalk messages or sketches near their driveways. It became something of a tradition. On weekends, families strolled to admire the ephemeral art, creating a sense of closeness that Harriet's restrictive approach had never achieved. That's not to say Harriet was content. She occasionally fired off stern letters complaining about ugly chalk residue or visual clutter. But the HOA board largely ignored her rants, having learned the cost of enabling such petty aggression. Freed from the shadow of Harriet's enforcement, Woodpine Meadows discovered a surprising capacity for color, expression, and acceptance. One Saturday, Chloe and Leon organized a chalk fest, inviting all families to decorate the sidewalks together. Even seniors with canes tried their hand at scribbling hearts. Jacob joined, scrawling his name in big, looping letters from the vantage of his chair. Harriet watched from her window. For once, she made no move to intervene. Perhaps she realized the futility. Or perhaps part of her recognized that the neighborhood's vibrancy outshone any fear of damage. Months passed, and while the original rainbow welcome path had long since faded under sun and rain, its spirit endured in woodpine meadows. The children continued to draw new designs, less grand in scale, but no less heartfelt. Adult neighbors, once wary of Harriet Farnett's scrutiny, began planting more varied flowers, painting front doors in bright hues, or leaving whimsical wind chimes. The strict uniformity Harriet preached gave way to subtle individuality. Embraced by the board, once it recognized no property value crisis erupted. Jacob Miller, now a beloved fixture in the community, found renewed confidence. No longer did he worry that each tire scuff might attract fines. Instead, he rolled freely, chatting with neighbors who respected his presence as part of daily life. The children, especially Chloe and Leon, gleefully greeted him with high fives or fresh chalk doodles, commemorating each new swirl of his wheels. As for Harriet Farnett, Karen, she never apologized openly. Yet her attempts to wage war on wheelchair marks ended in public embarrassment. Over time, her stance softened from pure hostility to resigned acceptance. She still lodged occasional petty complaints about the brightness of a porch light or the style of a mailbox. But the neighborhood, fortified by its chalk-laden triumph, viewed her demands with mild annoyance rather than fear. One evening, a spontaneous thunderstorm swept through, drenching the sidewalks, rinsing away the day's chalk drawings. Chloe and Leon watched from Chloe's porch, sipping hot chocolate as color ran down the gutters. Leon sighed. Our rainbow path is gone again. But Chloe smiled. We can always make a new one tomorrow. And we will, because this is our neighborhood. All of ours. In that simple exchange lay the lasting legacy of the great chalk battle. That a handful of determined kids, a caring wheelchair user, and supportive parents had proven that community spirit, and a few boxes of colored chalk, could transform an act of petty aggression into a bold statement of unity. Harriet Farnett's negativity had, ironically, sparked a more vibrant sense of belonging than Woodpine Meadows had ever known. The next morning, a fresh row of pastel hearts and stars appeared on the sidewalk near Harriet's house. Soft footprints and wheelchair tracks soon imprinted them, adding to the living tapestry. At least for now, an inclusive rainbow had triumphed over petty rules, reminding everyone that sidewalks belong to everyone's footsteps and to every set of wheels that might pass through, leaving behind marks not of damage, but of shared humanity.